Harlem Berry is back for 2026. We've got the deets. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get great podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. And I don't think there's going to be any problem leaving those comments below on a day like today, where certainly a lot of people are going to be very excited to learn that Harlem Berry is, in fact, returning to LSU for his sophomore season. Had that news broken to me, or told to me on Wednesday morning here on New Year's Eve. Source confirms that Berry and his legal team or his attorney was looking over his contract. It's expected to be signed on Wednesday, but terms are agreed to. It is done. Harlem Berry is coming back to LSU for 2026. And maybe the most interesting part of the conversation was that despite all the conversation about if Harlem Berry might leave, if maybe the lack of opportunity in 2025, or which we'll get into here in a second, or the coaching change, Frank Wilson going to Ole Miss, if any of that might have sort of deterred Harlem Berry, that maybe he would want to leave and seek a new opportunity. Apparently, that's not something he ever even really considered. As it was explained to me when, we did report here and at LouisianaSports.net, about a week and a half ago, when Berry met with Berry, his family, his agent met with Lane Kiffin, Billy Glasscock, and Kevin Smith. And what was explained to me is everything lined up from that first conversation. Billy Glasscock really prioritized Harlem financially, right? And we've, if you're an everydayer, shout out and thank you. We've talked about how this staff goes through their evaluation and how they evaluate the talent, the physical ability of the player, the teammate, all the sort of stuff. They place that financial value on that player and how it'll factor into their budget. And from the beginning, Billy Glasscock worked on the financial component of it for Berry. And then Kevin Smith sort of worked on how they would utilize him within the offense. And as I was told, that conversation, everything lined up from the beginning and was told, quote, it was never an issue, meaning Harlem returning, quote, it was never an issue. So this was always going to be the plan. And, the interesting part is with respect to Frank Wilson, I think, listen, I've told you I have known and covered Frank Wilson for a long time, have tremendous amount of respect for him. Frank has known the Berries for a very long time. We played that cut from Frank's press conference whenever he was, that first press conference when he was taken over as the interim, and he talked about knowing Harlem's dad, Harry, since they were in school together, and his mom, and how his family, his mom's in Zulu, and how where they went to high school, and his grandfather's a musician. And Frank has known that family so well for so long. And so I think, the thought was, might Harlem Berry just follow Frank wherever he goes? And ultimately, as much as Harlem Berry and that family love Frank Wilson, I think the love for LSU superseded that. I want to play this for you again. So I played this recently, but I'm going to play it again for the benefit of those maybe just finding this episode. But I spoke to Harlem Berry on my radio show when he committed to LSU. So this was, more than a year ago now. Or I guess about a year. More than a year ago now. When he committed to LSU, Harlem Berry, again, this is before he signed. This was before he played it down for LSU. This was the summer before his senior year of high school when he committed to LSU. Harlem Berry on my radio show said this.
I really had my mind made up. Like, I've been wanting to go to LSU since I heard of LSU. So Leonard Fournette playing all them type of players. But once I really had my mind made up and was like, I saw what I wanted to see, I was like, yeah, this is where I need to be at. I just went with it, and I was like, I need to commit. So I had my senior season to myself. I don't have to worry about no recruiting visits, no coaches, this and that. So I just wanted to make that decision early.
So for Harlem, it's more about being at LSU. And then there's an excitement being in Lane Kiffin's offense. Now, the other part of this is the numbers in the running back room and sort of the competition. Now, one other thing I did, the terms of the deal were not disclosed to me. And that's fine. I'll work hard to see if I can get it for you eventually. But what was expressed is that LSU absolutely made Harlem one of their top. There are 5 players, I think, that they prioritize. I'm going to get to those here in just a quick second, the rest of them. But and some of them are pretty obvious, but Harlem was clearly on that list. But there's 2 components here. Number one, when you look at LSU's numbers in the running back room, remember, Caleb Jackson has already declared his intention to enter the portal, as has Juwan Johnson. So that means you're only left with Berry and Caden Durham in the running back room right now. So you didn't sign a running back in the high school class. So you were in desperate need of solidifying this room. Now, there's also been the conversation about Kwan Lacey potentially coming over from Ole Miss. And listen, the NCAA, we've talked about the tampering allegations from Ole Miss and whatever. We've seen the phone call that got leaked of Lane Kiffin talking to one of Knox's friends about Lacey and Kevin Smith coming. And listen, Ole Miss, the NCAA, whoever, they can have those conversations. I'm just here to have a real life conversation. There's a real possibility, as I've told you, that Kwan Lacey ends up at LSU. Ole Miss has offered him $1.8 million. I've said it several times. I'm totally confident saying that number. They're going to make LSU pay him $1.9 or $2 million. If LSU is going to pay a running back $2 million, I think they get Kwan Lacey. It's that simple. So will they fork out that kind of money? We'll find out in relatively short order, I would imagine. But when I mentioned that, what was expressed to me was that the way that that it was expressed to me was that there's never been a running back room with one running back in it. And when Harlem committed to LSU, he was the 3rd string running back. So he's not afraid of coming and competing if Kwan Lacey comes in, and maybe even that tandem could be pretty incredible 1-2 punch if it plays out that way with Lacey coming. And if Lacey doesn't end up at LSU, well, then you've solidified Harlem Berry and you've got an elite level runner for next year in this offense, which should be an awful lot of fun. Remember, Kwan Lacey this year in this offense ran for over 1,300 yards and 20 touchdowns. A massively productive rusher. For all the talk about Lane Kiffin and the perception of him as a spread guy, a hurry up, no huddle guy, which at times he does, he always leans on the run. I mean, Ole Miss averaged 185 rush yards, 185 on the ground average this year at Ole Miss. So that's exciting to think of how a guy like Harlem Berry could be used in this offense. And that's how it's going to go. So Billy Glasscock handled the financial component of it. Kevin Smith made Harlem Berry feel good about how he'd be utilized in the running back room. We'll see what this means numbers wise at running back. If LSU does add a running back via the portal, does Caden Durham maybe consider transferring? I know that's been something that's been discussed quite a bit in different places, but this is a massive, massive win for Lane Kiffin, for Billy Glasscock, for Kevin Smith, for LSU as Lane Kiffin begins his inaugural season, being able to keep a guy. Again, remember a lot of this conversation. Remember how a lot of this has gone. You were going to have, Ole Miss folks, as we've talked about, with bringing Austin Thomas over and Frank Wilson over and Kelvin Bolden and Jai Shuderi, a lot of guys leaving LSU, going back to Oxford to work under Pete Golding. The thoughts of being rooted in New Orleans, getting players from LSU, from Louisiana to go to Ole Miss. And this is a massive win when you're talking about a 5-star number one running back from New Orleans, recruited by Frank Wilson. I mean, if there was ever a player that would check all the boxes to say that's a guy that would go follow Frank Wilson to Ole Miss, Harlem Berry would be that guy. And his love for LSU has kept him here, and this staff prioritizing him has kept him here. So Harlem Berry, rushing for just under 500 yards during his freshman season, will no doubt have a much bigger opportunity in his sophomore year in Baton Rouge, which will, of course, happen at LSU, as I'm happy to report here on New Year's Eve. Harlem Berry will be back at LSU for his sophomore season. So who else is LSU prioritizing? I want to dive into that. We'll do it as we continue. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during happy hour always brings something new. Boosts, bonuses, surprises, and it's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. So, before tip-off, check the FanDuel app, see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. We're also brought to you by Game Time, and there's nothing like college football season. Tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of it all. The energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever. But actually getting tickets, well, that part used to be frustrating with long queues, logins, and prices jumping at checkout. That's why Game Time gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. The zone deals, that stands out to me. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, you save even more. And by the way, you know the price, including fees up front. That makes the whole process stress-free. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. So Harlem Berry is returning for his sophomore season. And as we kind of look at the other priorities as I understand it now, I think there are 5 players primarily that LSU has prioritized. Now, some of them we've already discussed, and one of them is an obvious one on the offensive line, and that's Braylon Moore. Now, there was certainly going to be an eye toward potentially bringing Ole Miss center Spencer Sanders to forgive me, not Spencer. I think Spencer Sanders was the quarterback that transfer. Bryson Sanders, excuse me, Bryson Sanders. Spencer Sanders was the quarterback from Oklahoma State who transferred to Ole Miss, and then Jackson Dart beat him out. Forgive me, Bryson Sanders. So anyway, when Bryson Sanders committed to staying at Ole Miss, LSU needed to solidify Braylon Moore. And so Braylon Moore has become a priority, and we've talked about it. Braylon Moore is not a guy that is a portal risk. If Braylon Moore is not back at LSU, it's because he goes to the NFL draft. Now, that draft declaration deadline is the middle of January, so he's got a few weeks to maybe get feedback from the draft advisory board and decide what he wants to do. But LSU, with money to spend, if they're going to prioritize Braylon Moore, it could stand to reason, come back, play in this offense, hopefully boost your draft stock, make a little money, and solidify the interior of that offensive line. So Braylon Moore, Harlem Berry were 2 that they very clearly have prioritized. The other 3 are names that are going to make a lot of sense and pretty obvious, just as you say them. First and foremost, it's Whit Weeks. Whit was the second leading tackler in the SEC a year ago. And then this year, unfortunately, just had injuries and then unfortunate circumstances like the targeting call on the third play against Florida cost him that game. the injury he suffered against South Carolina, or against Ole Miss, excuse me. He took the open date, came back, played the game against South Carolina, knew it wasn't right. And then we only saw Witt in limited action for 2 more games the rest of the way, 17 snaps against Western Kentucky and 30 some odd snaps against Oklahoma. But, we saw it in the bowl game. The need to get Witt Weeks back. Devon Keys, Tylen Singleton, both made a lot of tackles, but somebody's got to make a lot of tackles. You're talking about a guy that would be your communicator in the middle of your defense, your middle linebacker. If you get a healthy Witt Weeks back in the middle of this defense, massive, especially considering you're losing so many of your top tacklers from this past year, where you're losing AJ Halsey and you're losing Jack Pyburn, and you can look across that defensive front with Peyton and Butler, all the guys, the veteran players, Harold Perkins, that are not going to be back. So if you're able to return Witt, it just stands to reason that's huge. So Witt Weeks, Harlem Berry, Braylon Moore, and then the other 2 are phenoms, one on both sides, one on either side of the ball. DJ Pickett, clearly, you're losing Mansour Delane to the NFL draft. And so Pickett and PJ Woodland would be guys that are right there, that would be among the best starting cornerback tandems in the SEC. But DJ Pickett's at the top of that list. And I would say that, PJ Woodland isn't far behind on this list. But if you ask me what I thought the 5 top priorities would be, Berry, Braylon Moore, Witt Weeks, DJ Pickett, and then Trey'Dez Green. Pickett, for obvious reasons, as important as the cornerback position is. This is a 5-star who played a ton of football for you as a true freshman. And I think there's a lot of reason for optimism to watch how that growth may go for DJ Pickett in year 2. Pickett this season, when I look at his total productivity on the year, he was the 4th highest graded player defensively for LSU in the entire season from PFF. It was Mansour Delane, Deshaun Spears, AJ Halsey, and DJ Pickett. And there's a caveat there with Spears, who played a total of 255 snaps. Pickett played 524 snaps for LSU on the season as a true freshman. He allowed a reception rate of just 52%. He was targeted 38 times, allowed just 20 catches. As a true freshman, DJ Pickett was awesome. So they're prioritizing Pickett, and obviously having Corey Raymond back in the fold, for all intents and purposes, means that DJ Pickett will be back, but you got to make it work financially, and they're prioritizing him. And then the other one, and the one that I'm going to tell you got to hold your breath on, is Trey'Dez Green, and I've continued to say this. It's a situation where Trey'Dez has took a little bit of a hometown discount his first 2 years in school, and he's just not going to again. And I know those conversations have already started with Trey'Dez. I know LSU has made offers to Trey'Dez, and I don't think those offers have been good enough so far. Otherwise, I'd have a similar report to you about Trey'Dez that I've had today about Harlem Berry. So they are prioritizing Trey'Dez, and I think they understand the importance of getting him back for what it means, not only on the field, but optically as well. If you lose a player like Trey'Dez that is a fan favorite that everybody loves, it's a total mismatch. And if you lose him, you're probably losing him to Ole Miss and Frank Wilson and Austin Thomas. That's a fair assumption that if you do not retain Trey'Dez Green, that Ole Miss will be among the chief suitors. And do you want to see him walk across the street to Ole Miss? We've seen a lot of, obviously, roster and coaching staff turnover and interplay. Trey'Dez is not one that I think they want to lose to Ole Miss, and so they've got to prioritize him and pay him what it's going to take to make sure they keep him in Baton Rouge for another year. So that's going to be one worth watching. A few other things. I mentioned PJ Woodland. I've heard Grant Chadwick's agent is kind of shopping him around as well, which makes sense. It's what this whole era has become. It's 1 year free agency. Grant Chadwick had a really good season in Baton Rouge coming in from Memphis. And if the number gets too big, maybe they're looking elsewhere for a punter. That's one worth keeping an eye on as we kind of look through it. Some of the other notes that I have here, Tyree Adams, again, that's a New Orleans area guy, went to St. Aug, who very likely could be following Frank Wilson to Ole Miss. That's one worth watching as well. Caden Durham could end up at Ole Miss, as we talk about, if he decides to go into the portal. But another one to watch is Corday Hankton. Cortez has been the receivers coach. Well, Corday is Cortez's brother, who was an analyst on the LSU staff working with the running backs. And when Frank got promoted to associate head coach, Corday took on an even greater role with the running backs. And so wherever Corday Hankton lands, that could potentially be a spot where you could see Caden Durham follow as well. So just something to keep an eye on as we follow this throughout all the remainder of this week and into the portal period, which will open on January the 2nd. Some of the names that we're keeping an eye on. We'll keep an eye on it right here on Locked on LSU. So the great news, Harlem Berry is back. Tigers, I told you the 5 names, Harlem Berry, one of them, but the other 4 that they're really prioritizing, we'll see what number of those they're able to retain for the 2026 season, which would be a massive part. Of course, yes, bring guys in the high school class, bring guys in the portal, but roster retention of the players you want to keep is as significant as any of it. And those are the 5 players LSU is really targeting to keep for 2026. And they have already checked one box with Harlem Berry. He'll be back for his sophomore season. Okay, that'll do it for us here on this bonus episode of Locked on LSU. Thanks so much for making this your first listen. Please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're on YouTube. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you every single day for Locked on LSU. It's your team every day.